Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the 12th Horseshoe podcast here on Search Sports TV. I am Jack Rizzo, joined alongside by my co-host Elijah Weintraub, and joining us today we have a very special guest. Please help me in welcoming NFL insider for ESPN, Dan Graziano. Dan, it's an honor to have you here. How are you doing today?
Oh, it's my pleasure, Jack. I'm doing great. How are you?
Very good, very good. Eli, how are you today?
I'm doing good, and I'm super excited. And I thank you. We thank you for coming on the show.
My pleasure.
Yeah, I'm sure it's been a very hectic off season. There's been a lot going on in the NFL, and obviously now in training camp, and that's the first thing I'm going to ask you about. So I saw on your Instagram you've traveled around the country for training camp. I saw you were at Seahawks camp, Chargers
Mhm.
camp, Broncos camp, I believe at one point. But I just want to know, like, what is it like traveling around these different locations for camp, and how different is the atmosphere compared to like a regular season game?
Significantly different and in all good ways. I think the training camp trip is one of my favorite things I do all year. And it pays benefits all year because you get to talk to these people in relaxed settings, right? They haven't lost any games yet. For the most part, the team is fairly healthy, right? Like they have a little more time to talk to you than they do during the season. So when I show up at a place like Seahawks camp, for example, I'll reach out ahead of time to their media relations staff and here's the days I plan on being there. And they say, well, who will you want to talk to? And I send them a list and talk about, what the stories we want to do or who we want to get to sit down on camera with us. And then, some teams are better than others at helping make that happen. But it's usually, I try to do 2 days if I can in a camp. There was some where I couldn't. When I was at Chargers, the Rams and the Chargers about 10, 15 minutes apart from each other. And the Chargers practice at 9 a.m. and the Rams practice at 4:30 in the afternoon. So you can see them both in the same day, which is great. So, I think it's one of the best things I do. I always come back with more phone numbers than I had when I left. And I think it's just really good for source building and for just getting a sense of, what to expect, or at least what these teams are expecting or planning as they prepare for the season.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. Eli's a Seahawks fan, so
Yeah, really appreciate it.
I think they should be good.
Thank you.
Yeah,
and I think they will be.
I like I was really impressed with their draft, getting in my opinion, the best corner and the best receiver in the draft, and also another running back to help the offense. They shocked us in the draft last year. Had some huge, like Tariq Woolen in the 5th round and Kobe Bryant also. Eli, they're going to be really good this year.
They're going to be really good this year, and I'm super excited for it to happen. And I can't wait for it all to break down. And with all these draft picks this year, it's been exciting and fun. And
I think one of the keys to a quick turnaround is like, not only having rookie draft picks that hit right away as they did last year, but also if you can, trading a franchise quarterback to a team that ends up having a lousy year, and now you get their pick too, and it's number 5. I think that's a nice trick that they were able to pull off, and I'm sure other teams would like to try it.
I'm sure they will.
Eli's very passionate about getting rid. He's like extremely passionate about getting rid of Russell Wilson, turning it into extra first-round picks. It's one of the best trades I've seen, honestly. And we all thought the Seahawks were kind of like a joke for doing this, and they turned
the best
out.
Decision.
Yeah. All right, Eli, you want to go ahead and ask your?
All right. So Aaron Rodgers, of course, he went to the New York Jets. He played his first preseason game last Saturday. What are your thoughts on him becoming a New York Jets, and what do you think the Jets will have in store this year?
I think the range of potential outcomes for the Jets is pretty wide. I think, and that includes some high end stuff. Like they could be really good. They have a top defense, possibly the top defense, depending on how you measure these things. If Rodgers can play like he did 2 and 3 years ago, and the line can protect him, then they have a chance to be literally a Super Bowl contender. Like they could be that good. They play in a tough division. The line could use a little more depth. They're really relying on a couple of wild cards at the tackle positions with 38-year-old Dwayne Brown and then Mekhi Becton, who has only played 1 game the last 2 years because of injuries. So those are concerns when your quarterback is 40 and not mobile and prone to fits of rage when things go wrong. So I think it's the kind of thing that if there you could see ways it might fall apart and then be something that didn't work out and they missed the playoffs and maybe people get fired over that. But you can also see why they did it. But they have a very strong roster around him, and they believe that it was worth a shot to try and elevate from this sort of middle of the pack team to possibly a Super Bowl team.
Yeah, absolutely. That's probably why the Jets were furious when the Patriots give up their pick to the Steelers so they could take Broderick Jones. Honestly, I have a feeling that's who the Jets would have taken if he was there. And speaking of draft night, that was a pretty big night for you, Dan, because not about the draft, but a few hours before, you were like the first person to report that the Ravens and Lamar Jackson had been having productive talks over the last few days. And what'd you know? A few hours later, it was announced that they had agreed to a contract, completely overshadowing the first round. So Baltimore Ravens fans, they definitely owe a lot to you for sure. But
well, it wasn't me. I just found out.
Yeah, still though, it was pretty tense few months there in Baltimore, even going back to last year.
Right.
But yeah. All right. So I talked about training camp atmospheres. I want to get into regular season though, because again, I saw you were pretty much in a different stadium every week last year, whether it was sunny Tampa Bay, rainy MetLife, snowy Buffalo, or icy Green Bay to see the Lions knock the Packers out. What is it like just traveling around the country and going to a different stadium every week? And because there's different circumstances for every game, really.
Yeah, I still get a kick out of being at the games. Like honestly, like I covered baseball for 14 years and I've been doing NFL now for about 10. And I mean, the travel is the travel, but football travel is a lot easier than baseball travel. And I just get a kick out of the atmosphere, right? Like the environment. Like I show up at a stadium at 7, 8 o'clock in the morning. There's very few people there. And to sort of be on the field doing my, pregame hits and sort of watch it come to life, right? Like they start to rehearse things and they come out and line the field. Like there's something about it. And your excitement for the day builds, and then people start to file out for warmups, and you can have conversations and talk to people there, and then the game happens. And after the game, you're scrambling to try and get somebody to talk to you coming off the field. You're going into the locker rooms and the press conference rooms to try and find out what happened and why. And I just think it's one of the best parts of the job. Like we spend all this time in the off season and during the week, like making calls and texts and reporting on what's going to happen and all that kind of stuff. And I always say, like, I don't think enough of us remind ourselves that like everything that we're reporting on is the effort of a team to win a game. And so like, here we are at the game, like this is the culmination of all the stuff we've been working on for months in some cases. So I don't know, maybe there'll come a time when I'm kind of like, I'd rather be closer to home. I don't want to travel as much, but game day still kind of gets me fired up. And the NFL is, you guys know, I mean, they make an event of it. Like Sunday is a massive day. Like it's right. Built up and the excitement. So it's just like when baseball, it was a very different feeling. And I still did enjoy going to baseball games, but the everyday, the routine, as opposed to in the NFL where every single game feels like a major production. It's I don't know, it's fun.
I totally agree. Sunday is a very important. I haven't missed a football Sunday in I think at least 5 years. It's me and my dad, watching I'm a Colts fan. That's how it is. But if it's okay if I ask, I know we're only, I think 10 days from the first Sunday, I think, or 11.
11.
Do you know where you're heading week 1 if you're going to a game?
Yes, not far. I'll be at MetLife Stadium for the Cowboys-Giants game that Sunday night. So pretty exciting opener for me, and I don't have to get on a plane.
That's awesome.
That sounds fun.
You won't be there for the Jets, I'm guessing?
What's that?
You won't be there for the Jets, or just?
Well, Monday Night Football is, that's we put that on, right? So our production crew and our studio crew and everybody will be there. I mean, I guess like if I wanted to go, I could get a credential and kind of tag along, but I think it's going to be, mob scene first of all, and right. I have get up the next day, which requires me to wake up at 4 a.m. and be at a show meeting at 6 a.m. And I feel like if I go to a Monday Night Football game and I don't get back till 1, might not be at my best when the camera lights go on.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. Alrighty, like
all right.
You can ask.
So you were a reporter for the New York Giants, for a writer rather for the team back then. Could you explain to us what you did with them and what your thoughts coming up this year for this New York Giants team?
So I went to ESPN in 2011. The job was NFC East blogger. They used to have a blogger for each of the 8 divisions, and you could write about any of the 4 teams, all the 4 teams, whatever. And it was a cool job because you were kind of like the job was kind of like to direct the conversation about the division, right? And kind of, you hear from fans what's important to them. You report on that. But after doing that for 2 years, they made a change and they switched to the 32 team model where they hired a reporter for every team. And what they did with me was they put me on the Giants, which was nice of them. It was the team that was closest to my house. I lived in Ridgewood, New Jersey at the time, so it was a little 20-minute commute. So for 3 years, I covered them. And it was, the NFL Nation reporter job has kind of changed a lot over the years. It was the start of the project. They weren't sure what they wanted it to be. Different people are in charge of it now. So there were years where I was writing 7 or 8 pieces a day and populating the site. And there were years where there's no, we want you to work on features more. But fundamentally, around the team as one of the reporters covering the team, every day, along with, the New York Times, the Daily News, the Post, Newsday, all those regular, that are always around the team. So those were lousy years for the Giants. They were the last 3 years of Tom Coughlin. And I think their records were 7-9, 6-10, 6-10. And not only that, but they weren't even an interesting 6-10. They would start 0-6, and so it's over, right? By Halloween, and you're covering games that don't mean anything. So that was a tough stretch. But there were a lot of interesting stories to work on. I mean, when they decided to move on from Coughlin, obviously that was big news. While I was there, one 4th of July, we got word that Jason Pierre-Paul had a firework go off in his hand. And that was an interesting story to cover, and his comeback, which was tremendous. And he ended up playing a lot longer and for Tampa Bay winning another Super Bowl. So, to me, those 3 years covering the Giants, the downer about it was I'm in December, right? And I'm watching all these exciting, meaningful games on TV. And the one I'm at means nothing. Right. So you feel like you're sort of marking time till the end of the season. And the trick was to find other things to write about other than the game results and who's going to be on the team next year, what the team thinks of these players, what are the chances they do make a change at coach, GM, whatever. So, there's always reporting to do. But in terms of the experience of those 3 years, maybe it probably could have been more fun and interesting. This year's Giants don't look like the Giants I covered. They were one of the surprise teams of the year last year, right? They made the playoffs. They won a playoff game. I don't think anybody expected that, either inside or outside of that building. So they're excited to build on it. A lot has to go right. Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley stayed healthy all year last year, which is unusual for them. Can they do that again? If so, I think they got a chance to be a good team. Schedule's a little tougher. Division is tough. They were one of 3 teams in that division make the playoffs last year. So, the popular opinion seems to be the Giants could be a better team this year and not do as well, right? Because they won a lot of close games and maybe this year's schedule is tougher. So I kind of line up with that. I believe in Brian Daboll. I think he's a good coach. I think he knows what he's doing, and I think they're on the right track. I think they need a little more yet at wide receiver position, maybe in some spots on defense, but I do think they're a team moving in the right direction. And this year, I don't think it would shock anybody if they snuck into the NFC East playoffs, which, the NFC is of the 2 conferences seems to be the one that, has more openings in its playoff field.
Yeah, for sure. I think Daniel Jones and Saquon, though, they have a better chance of staying healthy because of the new field that's there. That field is notorious for injuries. I believe Jason Kelsey called it the worst field in the NFL. There are so many players that absolutely despise that field. I've walked on it, and I don't blame them. It's very sticky, and it's definitely going to help them though. And yeah, the Giants, they have a new identity. I mean, it's been rough for them since they won their 4th Super Bowl, except for the 2016 year where they made the playoffs. It was the one year wonder story. But I think Brian Daboll seems like a fantastic coach. My grandfather, who's a Giants fan, he grew up during the era of Bill Parcells and Tom Coughlin. He loves those tough old school coaches. And I think he sees a little bit of that in Brian Daboll. So I really think the Giants, I think they can even win the division this year. I think the Eagles are the better team on paper, but I'm high on the Giants. They're going to be good.
Eagles and Cowboys should be good. I don't know what to make of Washington with the young quarterback. I mean, they have some talent around him, but the key thing to remember is that no one's repeated as NFC East champion since 2004. So the Eagles are not going to win it. I can't think of any other reason to pick against them, but this is held up for 19 years. So I can't go against it.
Speaking of the NFC East, had an interesting news a few days ago with the Dallas Cowboys trading for Trey Lance from the San Francisco 49ers. I know this was a topic on Get Up yesterday.
Oh, was it?
It's, obviously, can he be the future? I mean, they have Cooper Rush, but what do you make of this trade? Do you think this is the Dallas Cowboys sending a message to Dak Prescott that there's a chance that he could be on borrowed time in Big D?
No, I don't think it's a message because I think Dak Prescott knows his contract status, right? And the last time he was up for a contract, remember they franchised him and then they franchised him again, but then they got a deal done so he didn't have to play on the franchise tag a second time. It was a tough negotiation. And I think Dak Prescott is under no illusions about the idea that the next one might be tough. And that's probably going to be next offseason because he has 2 years left on his contract now, and they probably want to do it before he heads into the final year of his contract. Plus, he's got a $59 million cap number in 2024, and I'm sure they'd like to reduce that. So all kinds of reasons to do it next year. But, the Cowboys also remember that it was a tough negotiation. And it wasn't just them that was being tough, right? Dak Prescott was making demands that didn't line up with what the team wanted to do. He was giving them as hard a time as they were giving him. So what do? You plan for Dak Prescott to be your quarterback. They like him. They want him to be there his whole career. They'd like him to be their quarterback for the next 8, 9, 10 years. But, plan for the best, prepare for the worst. What happens if he gets hurt? What happens if he pulls a surprise early retirement? What happens if he doesn't want to come back? Or if this time they just can't come to an agreement on a contract? Remember, his contract that he signed however many years ago it was now, 3, includes a provision that prevents them from franchising him when it expires. So they don't have that leverage over him this time, and they recognize that it could be a situation where he walks. So you want to be as prepared as possible. And one of the ways to do that is to draft a developmental quarterback in the middle rounds and see if you can get something out, build him into something. Cowboys have been talking about doing this for years. They haven't really done it just the way the drafts have fallen. But they now use their 4th round pick for next year on a 23-year-old quarterback who's still very young, still a developmental project, and is talented enough that 2 years ago, one of the better teams in the league made him the 3rd overall pick in the draft. So they feel like if we wanted to use that 4th round pick on a developmental quarterback, whoever we took probably isn't going to have the ceiling this guy does. If he turns out not to be any good, it only cost us a 4th round pick. Like, it was worth the chance. But if he turns out to be good and we do lose Dak Prescott down the road, maybe he's the answer. If he turns out to be good and we don't lose Dak Prescott down the road and Trey Lance is dazzling everybody in preseason games one of these years, maybe we can trade him. So I think it's just a good business move by the Cowboys that maintains their depth at the most important position and kind of theoretically gives them options going forward. There's still a chance the guy can't play. Like, it's possible that he'll never amount to a starting quarterback in the league, but for a 4th round pick, I feel like they thought it was just worth the shot.
Right. And I think that's I think that was one of the great decisions that the Dallas Cowboys made, trying to sign him. And for Dak Prescott, yes, he had some struggle with the team. And we also noticed with injuries, it comes with, a price and it takes a cut. And I think that was one of the smartest moves that Dallas has made, going with a quarterback choice. And for only a 4th round pick was not bad of a choice. And I think Dallas did everything that they could, and they did everything right.
Yeah, I think it was a smart move. Obviously, a lot's being made of it because it's the Cowboys and it involves the quarterback, and these are hot button topics. But I don't think it's the team sending a message to Dak or trying to spark him to play better. They think the interceptions last year were an anomaly. He's never been an interception guy before, so they think that'll change, and they've made some changes around him that they hope will help.
Yeah, that's a great answer. It pretty much answered everything I was looking for. So thank you for that.
I tried.
Speaking of low risk, high reward moves in the NFC East, we'll stay here. The Giants made maybe one of my favorite trades of the offseason, giving up a 7th round pick for Isaiah Simmons, who to me is one of the most versatile players in the league. But we know the situation in Arizona. They're it doesn't look like they're going to win a lot of games this year. They're trading away pretty much all their players. I think Buda Baker might be next. Kyler Murray is now on the PUP list, but this guy was a top 10 draft pick 3 years ago, and he played safety, corner, linebacker, and edge rusher in college. And with Wing Martindale, who I think is a fantastic defensive coordinator, I think the Giants are going to be able to get the most out of him. And for a 7th-round pick, it doesn't even matter if he's good or not. You're pretty much giving up nothing for a guy who has as high of a potential as I think he does.
Yeah, I think that's the way they look at it too. A no risk move, and he's a guy that I remember he was a tricky draft evaluation. There were teams you talked to that thought he was a safety. There were teams you talked to that thought he was a linebacker. There were teams you talked to that weren't sure about him because they didn't know what position he's going to play. There were teams that thought, hey, we can get him in here and we can use him real creatively and move him all over the field. So Arizona has changed coaches a few times since they drafted him, and defensive coordinators too. And so I think he has bounced around at different positions. My sense of it is that Wink Martindale has an idea how to use him. Like a lot of these guys, when they're talking about player acquisitions, the question they ask is, well, what is he for us? What is he in our defense? And I think Wink has an answer to that. Wink is a big blitzer. He loves to blitz. And a guy like this who has his athletic ability can blitz probably from a number of different positions, which I think is part of the appeal. So you're right, Jack. It's a no-risk move. They can move on from him if it doesn't work out, and it won't have cost them anything. But the ceiling is there, and he was a guy that coming out of college, people thought was going to be just a really, really good professional football player. Hasn't happened yet, but he wouldn't be the first, late bloomer.
Yeah, I don't know. It just makes me. I feel like he's just gonna be a Pro Bowler this year, knowing the Giants. I mean, he's gonna line up against former Colt Bobby Okereke, one of my favorite players here when we had him. Not great in coverage, but he's good at tackling. Nice playmaker in the middle of the field, but we'll just have to see about that. Eli, you want to go ahead and
so with all the trades going on and all the changes going on for the NFL and all these teams, we're at the roster cuts moment of this season. What are your thoughts on it so far, and which team has stood out to you so far when it comes to these cuts?
That's a good question, because everything's still settling right now. We're on Wednesday afternoon, and the waiver claims that were made overnight on guys that were cut just got submitted or just got awarded at noon. So it's hard to assess. And then once that happens, teams will reassess and be like, oh, maybe we need to make a different move with this guy, or maybe we didn't get the guy we claimed, so let's work on the trade we were talking about with such and such team. So it's really tough to assess right now in terms of the cuts. I think, one of the things we saw was a surprising number, I thought, of quarterbacks getting cut, like backup quarterbacks, in a year where you're now allowed to carry a third one and use them in the game as a result of that, what happened to the 49ers in the playoffs. So interesting that teams are shuffling that position around. The big news, obviously, was the Jonathan Taylor thing, and that's what we were all sort of focused on yesterday, and ultimately ends up staying put. So what happens in that situation? I'm trying to think to answer your question, a team that stood out. I'm not sure. That's the kind of thing that it requires sort of a little bit of time to review.
Right.
An example, like last year, the Jets had the most players claimed by other teams that they cut on cut down day. So that kind of said to us, like, maybe the Jets might have a pretty good roster. And it turned out that they did, right? They just didn't have a quarterback. Right. So, I think it's give me a day or two and I'll have a little better answer for you on that.
All right.
I can say one thing, though. I was extremely surprised to see the Patriots waive both of their backup quarterbacks, Bailey Zappi and Malik Cunningham. Right. Mac Jones is their only quarterback on the roster right now. So that must –
But they re-signed – Zappi cleared waivers and they re-signed him to the practice squad. So teams do that too, right? They're willing to risk losing him because, but they still do kind of want him back. And so if they thought he'd clear waivers and they were right, so now he's back on the practice squad and they can just elevate him on game day if they need a backup quarterback.
Yeah, that's a good point.
When everybody has a backup quarterback active on game day.
By week one, though, they're going to have another quarterback on the roster. So it doesn't. I mean, We
Probably.
obviously know why there's 3 quarterbacks now because of what happened with the 49ers last year. They literally ran out of quarterbacks. But
They did
all right,
in the
as,
NFC Championship game
yeah.
of all times. Yes.
As a Colts fan, it's time to get to the Jonathan Taylor situation. This has been going on for a month. I follow a lot of Colts insiders here, like strictly covering the Colts.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of different perceptions about what's going on. I agree with. I'm not saying it's you, but like other national media reporters, they are saying that this is Jim Irsay's fault for this whole Jonathan Taylor situation. I understand that he put out a tweet when he wasn't supposed to, but at the same time, Jonathan Taylor said earlier this offseason that he was going to play out this year no matter what. And then he switches agents, and now he's demanding a contract and a trade. And obviously, we know that he did not get traded. And one of your colleagues, Stephen Holder of ESPN, just published an article today saying we knew the Dolphins were involved, but apparently the Green Bay Packers were also involved potentially for Jonathan Taylor. But also from what I read, a trade wasn't even close. Nobody even offered a second-round pick to the Colts. Apparently, the Colts had asked for Jalen Waddle from Miami. So obviously, that's not going to happen. We know that. But do you? So what do you think is? Why do you think Jonathan Taylor did not get traded? Do you think the Colts even really wanted to trade him? And do you think there's a chance he could get traded maybe at the deadline? We know he's not going to play the first 4 games, but in my opinion, I still think Jonathan Taylor never plays for the Colts again. But what is your opinion, Dan Graziano?
I think you're probably right, and he still could get traded. They could trade him now. Like you can trade a guy while he's on PUP. It's just it probably reduces the incentive of the other team to pay you a lot, right? Because now I know I'm not going to have him for the first 4 games. So he could also end up going back to the Colts and working out a contract, but the Colts don't seem to want to sign him. So do they settle on something like Josh Jacobs did with the Raiders, right? Like I know it's not the same because he's not a franchise player, but maybe they throw him a little extra, say come play for us, and then see what happens at the end of the year. My understanding of this situation is that Jonathan Taylor has felt for a while like he was kind of undervalued with the Colts, that they kind of treated him as sort of a disposable asset. And then when Irsay goes on Twitter or X or whatever it is now and says what he said, that kind of backs up that opinion, right? So now there's bad blood, and he may not want to play for them. Now, remember, like before he demanded a trade, he was looking for a contract, so he did want to play for them, right? Like he didn't go in saying I don't want to be here anymore. He went in saying I want to be here for a long time, and they said, well, we're not sure. And he said, well, I'd like to get traded then, and they weren't able to make it happen. Why it didn't happen? I think it's as simple as nobody offered enough, and I'm not surprised because you have to pay the Colts what they're looking for, and then you also know that you have to probably sign him to a big contract, and no one's signing running backs to big contracts right now. So to clear both of those hurdles, I think was asking a lot. In the end, I kind of thought they'd get a trade done because I thought the Colts would want to just be rid of an ugly situation and not have it hanging over their season. And maybe that does happen at some point in the next couple of weeks. But it seems like it was more important to them to get good value for an excellent player. And when they didn't, they decided not to move him. So what happens next is anyone's guess. I don't know why the Colts wouldn't want Jonathan Taylor around. Like honestly, like I've met him, I've sat with him. He's everything you want in a kid and a player. He's 24 years old, so it's not like, like Austin Eckler asking for a new deal at 28, an age where running backs start to tail off. Taylor's a smart enough guy that Harvard recruited him to play football right before he decided to go to Wisconsin. Like, I don't know. He seems like the kind of guy you'd want to have on your team, and the Colts don't seem real excited about it. And I think that has gotten to the point where it really bothers him.
And he gets extra points for being from New Jersey. That's always going to get extra points, but
it always helps with me.
So I know some people that, in the Colts, organization. And from what I've heard, they didn't say no to paying Jonathan Taylor. They just said not right now. Because it makes sense though. He's only played 3 years in the NFL. He was injured last year. He's had one like Pro Bowl season, and they're going through a change. They have a new head coach, a new starting quarterback. They don't have a single player now on the team that's over the age of 30. So they're going young. I mean, their cornerback room they're just like a very young team that's like going through a transition. And the Colts also did not pay Michael Pittman for the same reason, I believe, because they just want to evaluate and they want to see what they have out of these guys. So from my understanding, I'm not going to discredit you, but I think that the Colts, they are interested in paying Taylor, just not right now. They want to see how the season plays out before giving Taylor a contract. But I honestly totally understand though why Taylor is wanting a contract, considering that, running backs, they're probably the most replaceable position in football, and he wants to get the bag, before he gets injured again or something happens. But at the same time, the third hurdle of a trade is the injury. This ankle procedure that he had in January is supposed to take only 2 to 4 weeks to recover, and 8 months later, Jonathan Taylor is still not in any football activities. But yeah, it's just a complicated situation, and it's unfortunate that we're not going to have him, but
it is.
I don't know.
Especially trying to break in a rookie quarterback, right? Like that, it would be so helpful to have a player like that. And I think, he probably thought that was part of his leverage. Maybe he overplayed his hand, but I do know that the Colts are a little gun shy on giving out big contracts because they felt like some of the guys they signed over the last couple of years suddenly didn't play as well as they were before they got their contracts. And so that has them hesitant on signing guys too. Again, knowing Jonathan Taylor a little bit, I'd be surprised if he was that kind of guy. And I understand why a player in the NFL would not want to go into his final season without a contract beyond that, because anything could happen. It's a violent game. The injury rate's 100%. And especially at that running back position, you're doing hard, difficult, painful work that week in, week out. And that you're playing for a team in a league, in a market that isn't going to reward it at the level that you feel like it should. So it's a tough situation right now for running backs. I don't know. To me, there's ways to handle it, right? Like if you don't want to extend him, there's sort of ways to deliver that message. And certainly social media is not a good one. And I do think that he feels like he was kind of done wrong in some ways. So, I mean, I'm sure both sides have reason to feel that way.
Yeah, I totally agree. Now, we have a comment here Dan, this is somebody that you might have met. This is our mentor, Bobby Garanti. And he says, you might remember me from covering the Giants several years back, but thank you for joining my guys on Surge Sports.
I'm trying to remember where I would have met Bobby. He was at the Giants, like at the facility covering the team.
He does camera work and
got it. Okay.
Yeah, but
okay, great.
We're just as grateful again. Obviously, thank you a lot for joining the show. I know it's been a busy off season, but we're just gonna do a few more questions here, then we're gonna wrap it up. Eli, you want to go ahead and ask your next one?
All right. So for the AFC, it's pretty loaded right now. Is there a team that shows that will definitely be that number one team going into Super Bowl time if it's not the Chiefs?
Yeah, let's take the Chiefs out of it, right? Because they're not that they don't have issues, right? I mean, Chris Jones' contract situation is a potentially rough one for them. But if Joe Burrow is healthy, and I'm seeing reports that he's back at practice today, which is big news, that's the team that I think scares the Chiefs the most because they've beaten him head to head 3 times, right? And one of them in the AFC Championship game in Kansas City, and they played him right to the end last year. So I think that's the team that's best set up to beat the Chiefs and overcome them. Burrow, I think, is the real deal, and that team is got players and coaches that really feel like they're not a fun little story anymore. That they're one of the best teams in the league, and they should be thinking about winning championships. Buffalo has been right there for years now, fitting that same description. I don't think it would surprise anybody if one of these years that things broke right and they ended up winning it all. By the time they got to the playoffs last year, the Bengals are no joke. Like the Bengals were sure they were going to beat the Bills. Like they remember the game was canceled, the Monday night game, because of the Damar Hamlin situation. Yeah. So like 3 weeks later, they're back and they're playing a playoff game. And I remember talking to Bengals players before that game, and it was like, not to be insensitive, I understand why they get, but like you guys probably felt like you had a shot that night. And a couple of them were like, yeah, our defensive plan that night was real good. And so they weren't surprised to be able to go into Buffalo and win that game. So Buffalo, the Bengals, I don't know. I got to see it from the Ravens, right? The new offense and Lamar Jackson in that new offense and how it all looks, and a lot of question marks at the receiver position that if they're answered positively can be great. But, Odell Beckham didn't play last year. So I could see it happening, but I'd like to see proof. Whereas with the Bengals and the Bills, I've seen a couple years now of them being, at the very top of the league, just not breaking through to win the whole thing.
And I agree. I think it's definitely going to be between Buffalo and Cincinnati. And Cincinnati, I've always said from day one, and I wanted them to win the Super Bowl instead of the Rams, being a Seahawks fan, but didn't get that to happen. But yeah, it's a new young team, and they're ready to develop, and they're ready. Their time is going to shine. It's just a matter of when and how. And to switch up, what up the NFC?
The NFC, I mean, there's no reason not to like the Eagles. If the Eagles have a drop off, it's probably going to be because they lost some guys on some veterans on defense. It's time to pay the quarterback, so you got to make cuts elsewhere. They've been drafting the last 2 years knowing that was going to happen. They've drafted some good young defensive players, and if those guys hit right away, you're hearing all kinds of crazy good stuff about Jalen Carter in training camp. They could not miss a beat. But I think the Cowboys are right there with them. I think they're a good enough team to win the NFC one of these years. It's been 28 years. 49ers and the Seahawks. I think those are my four in the NFC as like the contenders for the top spot. I do think the Saints are going to have a really good record because their schedule is so soft. I was looking today, they play 7 games against teams that finished in the bottom 7 last year in defensive efficiency. Like it's amazing. Like you were looking like 26, 27, 28, 29. And they don't really play. I think they only played 2 games against quarterbacks that were top 10 in QBR, and those are Jared Goff and Daniel Jones. So the Saints' schedule could prop up their record to an extent that the Eagles and Cowboys and the 49ers and Seahawks may not be able to match because they're kind of beating each other up, and they have a little tougher schedules. So I'm looking out for the Saints to maybe be a higher playoff seed than the caliber of their roster might dictate.
All right.
The Saints, they just got to avoid the injury bug. That's plagued them the last few years. And they had last year, but if you can win 7 games with Andy Dalton, then you could definitely make the playoffs with Derek Carr. I'm more of a believer in the Falcons in that division, but the Saints will be good. In the NFC, I would not sleep on the Detroit Lions.
That's an omission by me. They do look, they have an exciting outlook for sure.
I think it's all because Dan Campbell's my favorite coach in the league. Watching. Were you in the Lions locker room after they knocked the Packers out after that game?
Yeah, I was there that night. So heading into that game, talking to their players and coaches, like the message was, because remember, they got eliminated from the playoffs like an hour before that game kicked off. And they were like, it doesn't matter. Like, even if that happens, like we never get primetime games, like ever. And we want them and we think we deserve them. So like, we're going to play hard and we're going to play well and we're going to convince the world that we should be on primetime more. And guess what, guys? The very next primetime game, which is next Thursday, they're in it against the Chiefs.
Right.
So someone was impressed. And I think they're a fun story. And I don't think it would surprise anybody if they had a good year. Problem with the Lions is like, they haven't won their division since 1993. Like it was the NFC Central, like it was. So it's an organization that hasn't done much winning, and to just sort of pop all of a sudden wouldn't be unprecedented, but it would be unusual.
The culture has definitely changed there in Detroit.
Yes,
as for the AFC, I hate to say this as a Colts fan, but the Jags, I think they're going to be really good. Trevor Lawrence is my MVP pick this year. I'm saying this all as a Colts fan. I feel like sinful for saying this, but
no, it's true though.
Obviously not us. We're kind of rebuilding. But maybe in a few years we'll be good with Anthony Richardson. But
maybe,
Let's
see. He's an interesting prospect.
Doug Peterson was a home run hire for sure.
Top pick quarterback, Super Bowl winning coach, won a playoff game last year under brutal circumstances, down 27-0. I was at their playoff game against the Chiefs. I thought they were toe to toe with them. That was the game Mahomes hurt his ankle. Like that was right there for him. So they
had chances.
Factor.
They absolutely had chances, and everything was there for them. And I really thought they had, especially with Mahomes' injury, but they couldn't figure out the puzzle, I guess you could say, and it wasn't their night. But they tried their all best.
They couldn't figure out Mahomes.
Yeah. Jack. The thing that's going to help Jacksonville this year is that all their toughest games on their schedule are being played at TIAA Bank Field, and I think the attendance is definitely going to go up there. They usually don't have a great attendance, but the culture has changed. Doug Peterson's a fantastic coach. Trevor Lawrence has got everything. I mean, He's probably the best quarterback prospect since Andrew Luck. I'm saying that confidently. I just think he's gonna be really good. All right. This is gonna be the final question. It's gonna be about the Bengals. We'll go back to them. I just wanted to ask you about Joe Burrow real quick. Obviously, the contract talks I think they've been. I'm not 100% sure, but is there a reason why a deal has not gotten done yet? And do you think a deal is going to get done before September 10th, the first game the Bengals play in 2023?
I do. One of the reasons the deal is not done yet is because T. Higgins, the wide receiver, is also trying to do a deal, and these things work sort of hand in hand with each other when you're talking about the Bengals and their salary cap budget. I don't know if a T. Higgins deal is necessary before the Burrow deal is done. I would not be surprised if there were a couple of different frameworks worked out for the Burrow deal, and it was like, we're going to use one of these depending on how the Higgins deal shakes out, because of the salary cap and the way it's structured. So I think that's part of the delay. I do think he was waiting for Justin Herbert to sign, and that's what now, about a month ago, a little more than a month ago. So because I think, in these situations, you can now go in and say, Justin Herbert got a really nice contract. Has he been to the Super Bowl? Because I have. And so I think I should get a little more. So I think that's part of it too. The agent is very busy. He is also trying to do a Nick Bosa contract extension with the San Francisco 49ers. So there are a lot of reasons why a big, complicated quarterback deal like this might not be done just yet. I would not be concerned about it if I were Bengals fans, though I know some are. Full disclosure, my 19-year-old son is a fan of the Bengals who grew up in New Jersey. He picked his teams when he was like 4 years old. So he picked them all based on the animals. So he roots for the Bengals and the Diamondbacks and the Raptors, so he's been miserable except for 1 year with the Raptors. But anyway, I know the Bengals fans are worried because I have one that I talk to every day. But I don't think they should be. I think it'll get done, and I think he'll be the highest paid player in the league when it is.
I totally agree. I just can't imagine him in anything other than a Bengals jersey.
Absolutely.
And speaking of choosing random teams, you remember coming to the camp that we were at. Everyone there asked me why I was a Colts fan, and I understand. The Colts are a random team in the state of Indiana, and I was raised a Colts fan. My dad's a Colts fan. He started rooting for them in the 80s when they were horrible. Of course, there was a whole Mel Kiper incident between him and the Colts. I think it was their owner. Or maybe I don't know. I think it was their GM. It wasn't Robert Irsay, Jim's father. But it's
GM. But who was it? I always forget. Anyway, yeah,
it's Chris Ballard.
No, I know who he is now. I mean, who was the GM that yelled at Mel Kiper?
Yeah. So, all right. So that's pretty much gonna do it for today's edition of the 12th Horseshoe podcast. Again, Dan, thank you so much for joining us. It was truly an honor. We're all so pumped for the season to begin.
Absolutely.
Can't wait to see again who is good and who isn't. There's plenty of surprises filled in the NFL season, and this first Sunday of Week 1 is probably my favorite day of the entire year. Even though the Colts haven't won a Week 1 game since 2013, but it's always fun though to watch everything. I am pumped for that Chiefs-Lions game on next Thursday. That game's gonna be phenomenal. But Dan Graziano, thank you so much again for joining us. It was truly an honor. And thank you to everyone for watching us. Go follow my show, The Horseshoe Show, which airs later tonight, actually. And Eli and I on the 12th Horseshoe. Our season predictions video is coming out this Friday. So hope to see you all there. Thank you, everyone, for joining, and we will see you next time. Bye.
Thanks for everyone for watching. Thank you, Dan.